Hello, and welcome to another World of UX podcast. I'm your host, Darren Hood. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Special welcome to those of you joining us, listening, watching for the first time. Welcome to the show. We're going to revisit an old topic today. No, not the Talk Circuit series. There was something that I experienced in the past week. It just brought some things to the forefront of my mind, and I thought it'd be a good idea to share these things. We're going to revisit the topic of UX maturity, but I'll give you a little bit of a background for those of you who never heard me talk about it or are not familiar with what UX maturity is. But I'm going to talk about 5 consequences associated with being deficient of UX maturity. But let's dive right in. We're going to be short and sweet here on today. Let's go ahead and bring up this little screen here so that we can share a few things with you about UX maturity. So basically speaking, what is UX maturity? Everybody's not familiar with it. It is something that usually goes unmanaged. A lot of people who are coming into UX today have no idea what UX maturity is. It's not covered in a lot of, not only in boot camps, it's not covered in a lot of institutions of higher learning in their UX programs. UX maturity does not get covered. There's a lot of problems because a lot of people who run UX maturity teams or UX teams, I should say, have no idea what it is, no idea how to manage it. And so UX maturity pretty much gets neglected for the most part. The sad part about that is that even though people are not managing UX maturity and people don't know what it is, doesn't stop it from being a thing. There's still a UX maturity level out there for every team. And as you're going to see shortly, because I go a little bit further than the stereotypical coverage of the topic, even individuals have UX maturity levels. And so when UX maturity is not managed, whether it's at the individual level or whether it is at the organizational level, and a couple other levels you'll see here shortly, it's still a thing. And when UX maturity is not managed, it's always going to be on the lower end of the spectrum. When people don't know what it is, it's always going to be on the lower end of the spectrum. And when these things happen, there are consequences. And so I had a conversation with some people recently, and I was talking about how people say, Darren, why are you always bringing up the stuff that's this bad stuff, this negative stuff, to put it lightly? Actually, one of the reasons we do it, 2 reasons. One, because if it's not on your radar, it's not going to get any attention. And that's what happens a lot of times. People don't know about many of the things that I talk about. And so it just slides right through. And because nobody's paying attention to it, that's not going to stop you from experiencing the bad side of that thing. It's not going to keep you're not aware of it. You're going to stick your head in the sand, so you're not going to experience the consequences. No. So that's why we're going here. And also because some people say, well, Darren, you don't spend a lot of time talking about the solution. Number one, actually, I do spend a lot of time talking about the solution, but as is part of my strategy, I'm not going to talk about the solution with you specifically if we cannot agree that there's something that needs our attention. Trying to talk about solutions without having achieved agreement that something needs our attention is a waste of time. And I'm not about wasting time. I'm not going to do that. So we are going to, for the people who do take the time to listen to this podcast, they're pretty much most of the time already aware of what we're doing and how we're presenting things, why we're presenting things. So we're going to talk about, again, the consequences at the end, but here, let's dive in. What is UX maturity? Now I'm going to give you a really base definition up front. And that base definition has to do with a measurement of how well UX is embraced and practiced within an organization. Let me give you that definition again. It is a measurement of how well UX is embraced and practiced within an organization. Now, this is one of many definitions. And when you see what I talk about in a bit about different types of UX maturity, then this definition is no longer applicable. But in general, this is what it's usually about. When you do a search in your favorite search engine, it usually speaks to organizational UX maturity. There's more than that, but this is a good starting place. We can start here. Now, let's look at a few UX maturity models, shall we? This one, Dovetail was sharing this one. This is called the Kaikendo maturity model, and it focuses on 5 different levels of UX maturity. One is it's unintentional. Organizations are unaware of it. They're rejecting UX practices as a whole. A lot of times it's limited to visuals. That means that people are at that lower level of UX maturity. The second level is referential. There are limits of time, cost, and resources, which means you can't do very much. Now, there are some discourses happening with regard to UX operations, but not very many. So those organizations are on the lower end of the spectrum. At level 3, there's some expert work that's taking place. There's some discourse. There's a few techniques that are being implemented. It's formalized. It's starting to deepen. Things are expanding. So at this level, it's starting to grow. You start to see a little bit of movement. You start to see a little bit of engagement, and you start to see some victories associated with UX. So that's level 3. According to this model, at level 4, it's now centralized. You have discourse. There's some techniques. And now you have some processes in place to ensure that UX is being given some level of attention, and the organization, they're trying to gain some victories associated with UX. So it's scalable at that point. You're starting to see it happen a little bit here, a little bit there, a little hit and miss, but at least there's some progress that's being made. And then the highest level in Kaikendo, the highest level of UX maturity is when it's distributed. You have discourse, you have techniques that are being used, you have processes that are in place, and the business is being impacted. So this is known as distributed in the Kaikendo maturity model. So, okay, pretty cool. Oh, we can deal with that. Here's a maturity model that was shared with the folks at UX Tweak. It's not bad. It's pretty good. I will have one criticism of this, but if you have any focus on UX maturity at all, it's a plus. So I'm going to give people credit if they're doing anything at all, because again, most organizations are UX maturity is absent. It's completely neglected. And some people are just doing lip service and it's UX theater because they talk about it, but they're not really doing anything. Or they're talking about it and they have all the wrong people in place, which means that no matter how much you're trying to pay attention to UX maturity, if you have all the wrong people in place, then that's all for show. Nothing is happening. But at any rate, at stage 1, they refer to this as the dark ages. So there's no UX design happening at all, no resources for design. All resources are going to business and technological needs. In other words, it's all about the developers. That describes what's happening at a lot of organizations, including your FANG organizations, or some people are starting to call it Mango. I don't care what you call it. It's still nothing. FANG is nothing. And just because some companies are FANG status, it does not mean that they've arrived when it comes to UX. It does not mean that they are mature when it comes to UX. So let's keep that in mind. Number 2, spot UX design. In other words, it happens here and there. Occasional UX projects, limited success. There's so many losses when that's happening that the wins that you get, they can be wiped out because of the losses. So please know and understand that hit and miss, spot UX design, not good. Don't want to be there. Some organizations, I've worked at organizations where this has been the case. UX design is looked at as a service. You come in, you go out. A UX team serves projects on an as-needed basis. Not too far from spot UX design, but the places where UX is implemented are hit and miss. It's we're going to do it here. We're going to do it over here. We can't do it over there because we can't afford it. Sort of akin to what we talked about with costs in the last model. At the 4th level, UX is embedded UX design. So projects teams, lots of project teams get their own UX resources dedicated. This happens in a lot of organizations because they don't have personnel available to distribute UX across the entire org. Still level 4, You're going to get a lot of wins out of that. It's not bad, but it's not great. That's not really what you want to target. But when you're trying to grow, if you can ascend to that level, that's going to be a win in a lot of organizations. Let's just call it what it is. But it is not the pinnacle level of UX maturity. So let's not celebrate that when you can do better. Let's not settle for that when you can do better. At level 5, the UX tweak model calls for infuse UX design. I don't mind this so much, but there's a problem with this, and I'll explain why in a minute. They define this as every project team member has fluent design skills. There's never a time where every member of the team has fluent design skills. That's just not going to be a thing, folks. So we can't do that. We can't go after that. That's not a thing. There's always people that are going to need to level up. There should always be some entry-level people that are being given an opportunity to grow. So let's not celebrate everybody on the team having that skill set that is just exemplary. That's not going to be the case. So good model in general, good ideas in general, except for that last little thing there. But kudos for making the attempt. At any rate, here's one that a guy that you may know put together. Yours truly. I created this one. And one of the reasons I did this was because I wanted to identify what was happening at each level, but give people something to shoot for and to challenge people to take ownership of where you are, to be honest about where you are. I see a lot of UX maturity levels where it's trying to reward people for being in that state of mediocrity, and you don't want to do that. That's not a good thing. And celebrating that, not a good thing. So I put this one together. At level 1, it's apathy. I've seen this. This is based on things I've observed at different organizations over my career. People have no genuine interest in true understanding of or value placed upon UX, with a constant reluctance to engage with UX professionals. You can have UX people on your team, but if you have people in the org who don't want to engage with UX, that creates some unnecessary battles. That's that apathy. And so that means that there's a lack of maturity in the org. Even if you think there's good maturity elsewhere, if there's apathy anywhere, then that downscales or downgrades the entire org. At level 2, there's exploration. They're at least giving thoughtful consideration to UX principles and practices. They're open to engagement, not quite committed yet. So you get credit because you're willing to engage and people are exploring it. There's some work that's being done, but commitment is not there. So you don't want to give yourself credit for being at a higher level if you're not really, you don't have all the different ducks in a row, so to speak. At level 3, there's adoption. UX is now garnering attention and regard and becoming valued and sought after. You're making strides. So there's some adoption there. Good. Level 4, this is when you start to see the real wins, where there is saturation. UX has recognizable traction within the org and included in an increasing number of projects. This is a great place to be. Things are happening. You're going forward. Not only are you getting wins for the UX team, you're getting wins for the users, wins for the business, and you have a place that you can focus on growing. This is wonderful. Then you have level 5. I call this assimilation, where UX engagement is now a standard throughout the organization, tied directly to that organization's profitability. So this is, again, a model I put together some years ago, back in 2019, and some people use it. I've seen some orgs that embrace this. And by the way, it doesn't matter which one, as long as you have something that you're doing, a strategy in place to manage UX maturity, then this is a good thing. Now, I mentioned earlier, there's more than one type of UX maturity, though what we're going to talk about today is focusing on the org. You have organizational UX maturity, which traditionally has been the only thing that people have focused on when it comes to this topic. There's actually discipline-wide UX maturity, and we're in a bad place today for several reasons. I won't get into that today because I'll jump on that soapbox and I won't come down. but there is discipline-wide UX maturity, and we need to recognize that and remember that everything that we all do contributes to that. So when you have, as I talked about in a recent episode, people out there saying that UX happens after the fact, you need to do the UI first, that lets you know that that deals a detrimental blow to the discipline as a whole. And now we're downgraded because of things like that. That's actually died off a little bit. It rose really quick, and I haven't seen anything about that since I started covering it. I hope that's the case, and I hope it disappears because it's not good for any of us, especially when you have stakeholders who get wind of that, embrace it, and now you go to work somewhere and you're having to deal with that pushback from that individual because they've embraced that inaccurate definition of what UX is. Anytime misinformation is commingled in what we do, UX maturity is downgraded. So keep that in mind. So there is a discipline-wide UX maturity. There's personal and team UX maturity. You can split those out. Your team has a UX maturity level ascribed to it. And then each individual has a UX maturity level ascribed to it. I ascribe UX maturity levels to my stakeholders. It helps me to manage them. I've talked about that before, but something else we need to embrace. There's educational or academia UX maturity, something that a lot of people that are operating in academia have no idea, do not consider it. They don't manage their UX maturity levels. That helps determine how well constructed a curriculum is, how well designed courses are, what kind of courses are available. It's just academia, educational UX maturity is almost neglected, like at about a 95% clip. It's worse than organizational UX maturity, mainly because people don't realize that they have the responsibility of doing such. And I won't get into that today. We can spend one whole episode talking about that. But again, we're going to talk about organizational UX maturity. And specifically, we're going to talk about what happens when it's neglected. I mean, picture yourself, it's a mystery. You're going down this dark hall. There's a light at the end of this tunnel, but for the most part, it's the kind of tunnel you really don't want to travel down. This is where we are today with regard to UX maturity, with regard to how it's handled, and with regard to what's going on with these consequences. It's a dark place today. But if we will embrace the challenge of managing it, if we'll embrace the challenge of making sure to maintain a strong awareness of what's going on, if we can have some strong EQ components, strong self-awareness when it comes to UX maturity and the different places where it's applicable, we can get a lot of wins. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can grab hold to. But let's get into these 5 consequences of UX maturity deficiency. We said all that to get into this. Number 1, when there is a deficiency of UX maturity, UX operations will not be able to generate the desirable levels of value. And when we don't bring value, we know the problems with that. You're not going to be able to sustain things. You're going to have trouble getting a budget to do certain things with your operation. You're going to have trouble hiring people, because why allow you to hire people if they're not bringing value? So this is a problem. And there's another side note here too that I just thought about. There are times that value is not brought because expectations are skewed, which is also a consequence of UX maturity. I've seen situations where people can't bring value because the expectations are unrealistic. People are put in compromising situations. They're put in situations where they can't win. They're put in situations where they want to get blood from a turnip. People are trying to get somebody to do something while at the same time, the person has been set up to fail. I mean, this is another topic. I think I talked about this during the Sinister series. I've seen situations where people expect folks to do the impossible. You tie the person's hands behind their back, you tie their legs together, you want them to swim the English Channel. This is not good. And it's a result of a UX maturity deficiency because they bring in people that are very skilled and expect them to do things in an unrealistic set of scenarios. That's not right. You bring in people who are entry level and you expect them to operate at the same level as a person who's been doing the work for 10, 15, 20 years. That's not fair. There are people who they expect people to deliver at very high levels when they don't have the tools, they don't have the support systems, and people don't realize this is all tied to UX maturity deficiency because when you have people in certain places, there should be certain types of expectations based on where you have placed people and the support system you put in place for those people in those situations. Yeah, it's all it's all tied together. But when everything is backwards and things are dysfunctional, then it just isn't going to work, folks. And then value, I expect that person to do all of these things based on what? Anyway, I could jump on that soapbox and won't come on. I want to come up. I want to present these 5 things. Value is directly aligned with the expectations. Expectations should be aligned with what you have afforded people to do. That's the term I was trying to think of and couldn't earlier. Affordances are part of what we do in UX. Affordances have to be realistic. If affordances are not realistic, the value prop is what people are expecting. It's just not going to happen. So think about affordances when you're putting people in certain positions. And then expectations will then be more realistic. They'll be healthier and you'll start to get what you expected. And now we won't have all of these weird situations. Anyway, yeah, a lot going on there. UX theater, when there's a deficiency of UX maturity, UX theater will be rampant. You'll have a lot of people, instead of doing the work that brings value, they'll do things, they'll put on performances. They will compete because with theater comes drama. So you have team members competing with one another. You have team members throwing each other under the bus. You have team members that are trying to do a song and a dance for stakeholders because they're playing the game, the order taker game, instead of being and doing what real UXers are supposed to be and supposed to do. So you get into performances instead of bringing value. Again, back to that word value, not a good thing. When UX theater is happening, that's never a good thing. Never, ever, ever a good thing when you're just doing things because it's what somebody wants to see instead of being the thought leader that you are as a UX professional and delivering what people actually need. That's what needs to be done. And one happens when you have UX maturity, another one doesn't. So at any rate, UX backsliding becomes inevitable. You start to, even if you achieved UX maturity in the past or achieved it to a degree, if there's a deficiency, the team starts to go backwards. You start getting into UX theater when you didn't do it before. You stop bringing value when you used to bring value. And that's because UX maturity is not being managed. It's not happening. You're not focusing on the right things and delivering on the right things. And now you start to go backwards. Not good. Nobody wants to go backwards. That's the funny thing about UX backsliding. You don't have to want to go backwards to go backward. You'll go backwards simply because you're not doing what the discipline dictates we should be doing. Are the fundamentals being focused on properly? Are you building up your team members? Are you helping people to go to the next level? When you don't do those things, backsliding happens automatically. Not a good look, not a good thing. Number 4, when UX maturity is being neglected, when it's not being achieved, the people in charge, which we'll talk about that again in a minute, the next one, there's some bonus items on the next one, but you won't be able to tell the direction your team is going. That awareness that I talked about, the self-awareness, what's going on with the team, Can you really tell where you are when it comes to UX maturity? If not, can you tell the direction you're headed? If UX maturity is not being embraced, if it's not being delivered upon, if it's not being managed properly, you won't know. You'll be in that same dark tunnel, but that light that's at the end, it won't be there, so you will have no idea where you are. Are you handling the fundamentals properly? Again, are you helping people to grow? Are you helping people are you helping them to achieve levels of confidence that allows them to operate properly as a UX professional? When UX maturity is not being managed, folks have no idea. And it's really sad, but I've seen it a lot, happens a lot. Then we have number 5, and we'll start to wrap up here, but there are levels of this one. Hiring, and this is happening all over the place. When UX maturity when there's a deficiency, hiring is automatically going to be dysfunctional. And let's look at the layers of that. Unqualified people are put in charge. Now, this is happening at least 80% of organizations today, especially when you look at organizations and you see the people are former art directors, former creative directors, and I know some that have transitioned into the discipline, but that's at a clip of about 10%. Most folks who come into UX from other disciplines do not transition in. They maintain their same persona, they maintain their same mindset, and then they try to operate in UX without actually transitioning in and becoming what UX demands that they become. And so when they're art directors, ego drives things, ownership drives things. People are not looking out for the well-being of users. They're not looking out for the well-being of the business. They're really on a creative high. That's what you ever seen UX people that complain because there's a lack of creativity over here. That person hasn't transitioned in. If you were there, you didn't transition in to UX yet, because what happens in UX is not about us. It's about the people that we serve. And so we need to let go of us. We need to just completely leave that at the door and start focusing on how we can drive wins for our teams, for the business, and for the users concurrently. If everybody likes the visuals on your design, considering the fact that we don't even work on visuals. Now, Darren, come on, I know some UXers that work on visuals. Oh, you'll know a few. There'll be some. We're not visual designers, folks. That's why the whole UX/UI thing was a complete losing proposition from the beginning. We don't design visuals. That's not our forte. That's not where we operate. I know teams where 95% of the people on their teams are visual designers, transitioned visual designers who know nothing about UX and don't care. They care about that check because they found out they could get paid more doing UX work than they could doing UI work. So they transitioned in and they're over here faking it till they make it. Those are your UX theater people, and they hate real UX practitioners, pure UX practitioners. They hate us because we make them look bad. And anyway, that goes back to the UX theater and the drama and things of that nature. But when unqualified people are put in charge, and I saw a situation, I believe I talked about this recently, where almost the entire team, if not the entire team, from the director all the way down to the entry level people, are all former visual designers. They're not going to be able to bring value. It's not going to happen. Things are going to look nice, but they're not going to work nice. And that's what UX brings to the table. That's our value prop. At any rate, unqualified people will be put in charge when hiring is dysfunctional. And then they're going to bring forth more people that are exactly like them. Pretty sad. They won't know who to hire. They'll see the applications in some cases. Sometimes they won't, because also a side effect of this is the HR people don't know who to hire either, because they're not getting good downloads and good guidance from the UX people because they're out of place, so they don't know what to do. They won't know who wasn't hired. And a lot of times the person they should have hired will get overlooked in a heartbeat. Because a lot of creative people, they also look out for other creative people. And so when they see a UX people or person, they don't want us there. They want to make sure they bring in another visual designer. It does not help the discipline. at all. Fraternal is a term that I was looking for. Not a good thing, folks. They'll celebrate. They'll hire the wrong people and then celebrate it, which pretty much reinforces the fact that they've done the wrong thing. Now you're talking about Dunning-Kruger at work in hiring circles. It doesn't work. It doesn't help. It's not a good thing. And lastly, there'll be a lot of mediocrity and it's going to be commended. These are the things that happen. These are all byproducts of a deficiency when it comes to UX maturity. Not a good thing, folks. Not a good thing. We don't want to operate here today. You want to make sure that you're looking at whatever model you choose. That's fine. Even if it's the one that the UX tweaked, folks. I love UX tweak. I just wish they would tweak that last definition, but it's still a model. It gives you something to follow, something that has some nice goals that you can set, something that helps you to look at yourself in a very, very objective way so that you can be honest with yourself. You know what? I need to grow in this area. We need to grow as a team. We need to grow in this area. When we're honest, when we give ourselves something that's very substantive to shoot for, everybody benefits. But if you don't take the time to manage UX maturity, you will end up being deficient in one or more ways, and then the consequences will await. They cannot be avoided. So let's be honest. Let's grab a model. Let's make some progress, and let's move our teams forward. And when teams move forward, discipline then benefits, and we're all better for it. Sound good? Makes sense? I hope so. That's all the time we have for today. Like I said, short and sweet today. I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope I gave you something to shoot for, and I hope that you're willing to take your teams and yourself forward in the discipline. This is how we help to gain wins for everybody in the discipline. And this is what pure UX is all about. All right, folks, that's it for today. So until next time, this is Darren Hood, the host of The World of UX, signing off. And until then, happy UX, everybody.